What individual had the greatest influence on your wrestling career?
Well, I think a lot of people have had, major influences. The direct answer is probably my dad and kind of getting the double lifestyle of a coach in the family, and then also being a coach, for me in the club sense, and then for the high school team. It's probably the most influential person in my younger years and in my high school years, and even giving me advice, when I was in college, or helping coaching me. The second guy was my head coach in college, a guy named Corey Ruff, and he had a great impact on me for that next level of wrestling. Just the requirements it had for the college atmosphere, and he really was an influential part of that second half of my career.
That's awesome. This is a question that people, the last two, have kind of been on the fence on answering it this way. It says, who was your wrestling idol when you were growing up? So it says idol, and maybe you had someone you chased, maybe there was someone you went after, but if it was an idol?
I got tons of idols, man. I grew up in a place where, I changed that word to heroes. He was my wrestling heroes. All the guys at Brandon that wrestled before me, all the legacy guys, and I could rattle off like 20 names, but all those guys are my heroes. Like Josh Lambrecht, him and his brother used to babysit me, when I was little, and Josh is really, even though we're vastly age different, but it's even in today's world, anytime I can talk to Josh, I will, because I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk to him and share stories with him. But knowing him and his stats and his wrestling as I grew up was probably one of the biggest ordeals. And then also all the other Brandon guys. You got Caesar, you got David Craig, you got Eric, you got my brother Rocky, you got guys like Mark Church and the Tabor brothers, and anybody on that wall was my hero. Anybody on that wall at Brandon was I used to look up there and just read off the names, ask questions. Then I'd finally meet them and go, oh man, this guy's cool too. And so that for me that's a good question for me, because I got a lot of historical value in my wrestling career.
Yeah, obviously coming up in that.
Right, yeah.
A lot of people to look up to. What personal attributes or abilities contributed the most to your success?
I just think, I like just not being. People will tell me like like when I was wrestling, I was athletic, I was strong, I was fast, I was explosive. But a lot of the time, what made me a little bit better than a lot of people was just understanding the game. Just from a 6-minute match or a 7-minute match, there's 3 periods. You could take a stall call, you could do this, you could do that. And I always really viewed wrestling as a chess match rather than just some sort of sprint. And I understood that pretty early on. And I think when you want to win really bad, you start looking in deep corners of the sport for stuff like that. And so I think that would be one of my best attributes for wrestling.
Awesome. Next one. What is the most outstanding memory you have as a competitor in the sport of wrestling?
I got a ton, man. I got a ton. I think when I was a junior in college, and I was wrestling for Lindsey Wilson, we were wrestling in Topeka, Kansas, and it was the 1 year, and I had this written in my speech, but it was way too long. But it was the 1 year, and my dad, he was the coach at Brandon at the time. The FHSA moved their date for their season, and so I forget what year it was. I was a junior, but he was able to come to the NAIA Nationals and watch me win in the finals, my first national tournament. And so that was spectacular, and that's probably, on top of everything else, I've had some great moments with teammates and coaches and stuff like that, but him being there, that was a pretty good one.
That's awesome. This kind of leads into the next question.
Okay.
Throughout your wrestling career, is there a single most memorable match or event?
Well, we you know, sometimes when you wrestle as long as I did, and you're successful as I was, I've won a lot of individual wrestling matches. Sometimes what you think about when you're 15 years retired or 10 years retired, you start thinking about the losses. You start thinking about how they changed you as a wrestler, or how they impacted you. And a lot of losses that I took, I tried to turn around and fix whatever the problem was. Losses will teach you a lot more than wins. And so I've taken a couple heavy losses, in the Fargo finals, in different huge environments where, I lost the NAIs when I was a sophomore. That was a big pivotal match that I lost, and I learned a lot from it. Things like that. But wins, probably, winning the first state title for Brandon when I was a freshman, that was pretty awesome.
What made you get in? I think we all know the answer to this.
Sure, ask it. I got it.
You were born. You were born into it. But what made you get involved in the sport of wrestling?
Well, I was born into it. But my dad will tell you I was a heck of a soccer player, and I could have did any other thing that I wanted to. But I wasn't. Being born into it's a weird situation because you never realize it until later. You go, yeah, my dad's a coach at Brandon. I wrestle. He wrestled. He's a good coach. I'm trying to be a good wrestler. It's like, not really. Everybody builds it up more than I did. It was just normal for me.
Right.
So, but yeah, getting into the sport, I was all about it, man. I loved wrestling, and I've loved it ever since. And I couldn't see my dad being a basketball coach and me being a basketball player, or even football. I couldn't. It doesn't fit our psychology in life and our kind of mantra. But yeah, being born into it was real special, and I'm real thankful for it.
All right. So if you had the opportunity to start your career over again, is there anything you would change?
I'd probably learn some shots a little bit earlier. That's a joke. No, I wouldn't change anything. I think when I won my last tournament, the NAIs, and I kind of retired, and I really felt I'm not one of these guys that keeps going back to it, that thinks they're, maybe I'll go out to the US Open this year or something like that. When I retired and I did my last match, I felt fully complete as a wrestling career.
That's awesome.
And so restarting it, or I think I've had the perfect run, with some slight hiccups and stat wise with wins and losses, but I think I've had quite the run, and I wouldn't start over. Not for
perfect.
nothing.
All right, and lastly, in conclusion, what would you like for people to remember about you?
That if I move off and move to Alaska and you guys never hear from me again, I was talking to some guys last night, and I think the most important thing about me that I want to be remembered by is that, Brandon. And on top of that, Florida. I was always proud to represent Brandon. I was always proud to represent Florida. A lot of those accomplishments that I have for Brandon, tack on with Florida. And I was always proud, freestyle, Greco, I was always proud to represent the whole state as a whole, wherever I went. Even when I was in college, they would say, Joe Cozart from Lindsey Wilson College, Brandon, Florida. I was always happy to represent Florida and Brandon.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sitting down with me, and again, congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.